Okay, so welcome back everybody for the last session of the day. The objective of this session is to give you a summary of the afternoon, but actually we would be revisiting the cases through a different lens. So we will be looking at some of the topics, considering change and considering the speed at which the change is happening in all these industries. So first, we will give you some data that actually show that many aspects of our society are changing at an accelerating speed. And then we will discuss very briefly what are the drivers behind this acceleration in the speed of change. Then finally, we will introduce a framework that looks at change along two dimensions. The first one is the speed at which change is happening, and the second one is actually the direction towards change is going. And then we will use this framework to revisit some of the cases that we've seen this afternoon. So many aspects of our society are changing at a faster and faster pace. And this has serious implications on the life cycle of industries, businesses, and products. So consumers now change their lifestyles very quickly and are also able to adapt to new technology much more quickly than before. So if we look here at the time that took for new technologies to get widely adopted within US households during the last century, we see that basically towards the end of the centuries, technologies were adopted approximately 5 times faster than at the beginning of the century. So this is a big change. And the accelerating speed of change concerns not only the adoption of new technologies, but also the exchange and the creation of information. As you saw in the previous presentation about the impact of digitalization, there's a lot of information created in 1 minute in the internet, and this amount of information is actually growing. And what is interesting to notice in this slide is actually that some of the ways that we used to communicate, some of the technologies that are not even 20 years old, like email, are basically already peaking and are reaching at a mature stage only after 20 years. So what is driving this speed of change? If we look at this acceleration, we see that there is an acceleration in the adoption of new technologies, there is an acceleration in the creation of information, but there is also an acceleration in the production of new technologies. But why are we innovating faster than ever? As individuals, we are not more clever than we used to be. We are not more creative, but the big difference is that now we are more connected. So basically what happens is that we live in a globalized world where information is free to be exchanged. And this creates a global awareness in consumers that now know what's going on all around the world. And basically now these consumers are demanding more and more innovation that fuels technological advance, then again drives more exchange of information and more globalization. So this actually creates this circle that keeps speeding up change in our society. So given that the acceleration in the speed of change is actually happening, what should you do? Should you just embrace it and go with the flow? Should you try to control it? Or should you try to profit, like Warren Buffett says, from niches in which there is actually lack of change? So to answer all these questions, you should think of change along two dimensions again. You should think in terms of the speed at which change is happening and the direction towards where change is going. So it is common knowledge that the companies that innovate more quickly and that change more quickly are the ones who are going to grow more in the future. But is this actually always the case? So again, if we look at these two dimensions, we can have a change that is either fast or slow, but more importantly, we can have a change that goes towards the right direction, goes towards progress, and the change that goes towards the wrong direction. So it's actually creating a regression. So what is actually important is not really to innovate quickly, go quickly, change quickly, but it's actually important to stay on the right-hand quadrant of this matrix. So you need to be able to actually drive progress rather than driving change per se. So I will now hand the stage to Imanol, who is going to use this framework to analyze some of the cases we've seen.
Thank you, Carlo. Okay, now I will start talking about innovation, because innovation has been set as the holy grail of business. Everybody talks about it. If you go into the web page of every important company, they set as their main value, we are focused on innovation. And actually, this innovation is seen as the only way to compete, and is the way of being of many companies. It's very useful when you want to get market share. It's very useful when you want to repel some rivals' attack. But there is a dark side of innovation, which is complexity. The more you innovate and the more innovative forms of organization that you put into your own company, the more complex this company becomes. And actually, this can be a trade-off of complexity versus innovation that actually cannot, sometimes you can be too much innovative for your own health. So you can eat all the added revenues that you have from your innovation by the complexity added. So linking this to the digitalization group, this team talk about the 4-stage model, 4 steps where you can implement how it affects to your company, this innovation. We have that for every step, we actually have like an increase of level of complexity, and then we also have a potential payoffs. So there are some situations, mainly when you are not actually the driver of the market, you are not the market leader, where if you actually over-innovate, you increment too much the level of complexity, and as the industry is a bit behind you, it doesn't pay off. So you invest a lot in innovation, and this innovation doesn't have any reward. So actually, in this case, although you are innovating a lot, you are in a situation where you are fast going into regression, as you are investing a lot and you are not getting returns. On the other hand, you can have other kind of companies which are actually not catching up with all this innovation. They are far behind the market leader. So these companies will little by little lose competitive advantage by not innovating and not catching up. And actually, they will go by not changing and not going into a situation of slow regression. Then we saw the case of the electricity. Electricity industry as an industry is an industry that has been progressing very much. The demand has been growing, and the industry has so far been able to catch up with this increase of demand of power. However, there are some global trends that are threatening this model and actually are forcing the industry to change. So we have a situation where actually is the industry the one that is demanding for change. So we see that if the industry actually does not react to these trends and does not give solutions and is not effective at the time of actually implementing these changes, we can go from a situation of fast progress into fast regression. And actually, this challenge specifically, as they said, it was like the volatility on the demand to address the volatility on the renewable energies, and then also the decentralized model, and also to implement the smart grid. When we were talking, the group that was talking about the resource constraint, we saw, and also Carlo explained that now the product life cycle are getting smaller and smaller, and this is actually producing a lot of waste and a lot of demand for materials. So we see an industry that actually is speeding up very much, and we also see that the technology is not able to catch up with and giving substitutes to this industry. So we see a divergence and a very big gap between the speed of the industry and the speed of the technology that is not able to catch up and to give renewable substitutes to continue with this short life cycle. So, as we see, we are going into fast regression. However, here what the situation is asking for is new models that allow us to reuse the material, so we can actually balance both speeds, the speed of consumption and the speed of generation. So in this case, we are looking for a model that allows us to actually slow down. We don't want to go fast, actually we want to slow down. And by slowing down, we will go back into the progress by having slow progress. Finally, the fast mover consuming goods. We see a situation, an industry that has been progressing a lot. As they say, the horizon is very positive as we have a lot of new customers coming into, a lot of developing countries, people that have never bought before fast mover consumer goods that are going into the market. So this represents a great opportunity for them. However, there are some other global trends as protectionist and resource constraint that actually can make their life quite difficult if they are not able to adapt and apply the changes that the industry is asking for. So we can see a situation where the industry, if it's not able to adapt, they will actually be getting behind compared to local competitors, and they will actually go into slow regression if they are not able to apply these measures. So, which are the key takeaways from this presentation? First, we have to say that a change doesn't mean progress. So you can actually be changing a lot and actually going into regression. And this is also linked with the trade-off between innovation and complexity. And actually the important thing here is not to innovate a lot, actually is to find the right balance in your industry and see whether is your optimum level between innovation and complexity that you want to add. We also saw that in some industries, sometimes you have to actually slow down to drive progress, but as also other times, as in electricity, the industry is actually demanding for change, and you really have to speed up to meet the industry demands. And at the end, everything is about controlling the pace. You have to be able to control the speed of the changes that, and be aware that which is your optimal level of change. So now, I have some questions here, and I would like to ask you about the speed of change of your business. I would like to raise your hands, the one that think that the speed of change is actually accelerating in your business. Okay, and now I would like to know which one of you think that actually is your company, the one that is pushing this change, this speed of change. No one?
One. We have one.
Okay. So actually, so after this, I also want you to reflect about this change. I mean, first of all, who is driving this change? We also saw one company that's actually pushing the change, but in the other cases, who is actually driving this change? Is the own industry? Is the competitors? Is the consumers? Who is actually driving? And more important, this change is actually making progress, or is making the industry more competitive and actually less profitable? As we saw in fast-moving consuming goods, this change going into more package is actually creating less space for profit and less space for business. So this is all about the presentation. Now I really would like to hear your comments about the whole afternoon, and after that we have 10 minutes, and after that we will go for dinner. So if you have any question or comments.